Hello and welcome back to my mini-series on organizational culture. My name is Davidson Abhishekam and today we'll be discussing all about culture evolution and what it all means. Now, culture evolution is basically our organizational culture categorized into 5 main types. And today I'm going to take you through the 5 types so we can identify what are the 5 cultures that may or may not manifest in our organizations. Now, it is important to note that these 5 cultures are ranked from least favorable to most favorable. Now, the 5 cultures are the blame culture, the multidirectional culture, the live and let live culture. Fourthly, will be the brand congruence culture, and last but not least is the leadership enriched culture. Now we're going to start off with the first culture, and that is the blame culture. Now almost 60% of companies who took our assessment demonstrated the blame culture. Now some characteristics of the blame culture include very little trust and communication among employees acting in self-interest, and employees who do not want to take too many risks because of the culture of blame, where they have a fear of getting into trouble or getting into a situation with other employees inter-department. As a result, you will have very little innovation among these employees. And these employees are often paycheck driven. They turn up to work just to collect a salary at the end of the month, and as a result they become inefficient and they are not engaged with the goals and the objectives of the company. So they become your everyday underperformers and underachievers. To identify the blame culture in your organization, you can quickly look at 2 primary values that may be apparent. Number 1, avoiding conflict, and number 2 is self-preservation. Now moving on to the second culture, which is the multidirectional culture, which is slightly more favorable than the blame culture. Now some of the characteristics of a multidirectional culture is where there is very little communication among employees of various departments. Employees prefer to work in cliques, or they're forced to work in little groups or in clans, especially inter-departments. There's no trust with other departments except for their own. This results in a lot of gossips happening between Department 1 with another department. For instance, the finance department does not get along with the marketing department, or the finance department doesn't get along with the sales department. Now the finance department doesn't get along with anyone usually, isn't it? Right? So this results in a lot of gossip and backbiting as well in many cases, and criticizing of other departments. And a lot of times you will notice very little cooperation between departments in the company, and there's no common vision as well. Now the primary values to identify a multi-directional culture is where employees do not want to get involved in other people's business, and responsibility stops at their own department, their own job description. Now let's move on to culture number 3, live and let live. Now some of the characteristics of a live and let live culture is complacency. Now, if your organization is already making money, why should I change? Why should I do anything better? Because the company is already doing well, we are already making money. So as a result, you're going to have employees who have what we call mental stagnation. This is the attitude of, why should I improve? Why should I do things any better? And this again results in low creativity and very average cooperation among staff members, very average communication among staff members, with very little future vision. Now, if you remember what happened to Nokia some years ago, they believed that they were market leaders in telecommunication, in handphones. But what happened to them, although they were leading in that market, right, this complacency set in, and their competitors took over them. And we all know what happened in that story thereafter. So these are some of the characteristics of a live and let live culture. If your organization has a culture of live and let live, the primary values of this culture is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Because everyone is complacent in that sense and they want to keep the status quo. Right, so over to the next culture, which is brand congruent culture. Now, having this culture, the brand congruent culture, is obviously way better than the first three that we discussed, where your employees believe in the product and they are passionate about your product and service as well that your company offers. They feel good about what your company is trying to achieve. They feel as part of the team. Cooperation is generally pretty good, and your employees have similar goals as everyone else in the organization as well. And they oftentimes use personal resources to even actively solve problems, having the mentality of doing whatever it takes to get things done, simply because they feel part of the team. And oftentimes you will notice that these employees are not limited to their job description. So meaning they would go out of their way to get things done, even if it is part of their job or not. They will actively look for solutions because they own the problems in the organization. And you will notice everyone being in the sales department, because no matter which level of staff they are or employee that they are, they would be contributing to sales initiatives and also the marketing initiatives of the organization. You can consider them to be the ambassadors of the organization. How would you know if your employees or your organization has a brand congruent culture? Right? The primary values is basically the product and service improvement is everyone's responsibility. Right? So moving on to the fifth and final culture in organizations, which is the leadership enriched culture. Now, in leadership enriched culture, people view the organization as an extension of themselves. And your people will feel good about what they personally achieve through the organization, because there will be a lot of opportunities for them to learn, for them to grow, and for them to contribute to the organization as well. And you will notice that cooperation is also exceptional within departments, inter-departments, and intra-departments as well. Individual goals are also aligned with the goals of the organization, as mentioned a while ago, and your people will use group resources to actively solve problems. Culture, they are not limited to their job description, where everyone are part of sales and marketing of the organization. And your people will also constantly be bringing out the best in each other, because they all feel part of this bigger family, part of this bigger team that wants to achieve for the organization and for themselves. And you will notice extremely low employee turnover at the same time. And last but not least, most people here are passionate about the organization and what it represents. So how would you know that your organization has a leadership enriched culture? Now, one of the primary values is everyone has something to offer you and the organization. And by assisting others to be their best, you will become better. And last but not least is leadership is an identity that one must adopt, as it is not a skill. So those are the primary values where you will know that your employees have contributed towards a leadership enriched culture. So these are the 5 levels of organizational culture. Now the big question is, how evolved is your organization? Now in our next episode, we will be discussing benchmarking your organization, because by benchmarking, that is how you determine how or which culture you fall under. So there will be an assessment that you will need to do company-wide, And by assessing your employees, we will determine the type of culture, the 5 cultures that we just discussed that you fall into. Hope you find today's topic beneficial. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a like and remember to subscribe to my channel. See you in the next episode.